Spring has sprung. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of shades of green, it seems. There's an abundance of color as wildflowers begin to bloom. There are rushing creeks and rivers filled with water. It's that season of hope in the sunny days and the cool breeze. It's coming out of that time of dormancy, that time that we have been hibernating, and especially this year with COVID, we're breaking through, we're emerging into this season of spring with a whole new kind of vitality. So imagine, if you would, if humanities and societies, institutions and ways of being could actually be a reflection, a true mirror of Mother Nature. What would it look like if we celebrated ourselves in all our beautiful diversity, like we celebrate nature in all of its beautiful diversity? What would it be like if we really allowed ourselves to see ourselves through the eyes of God as nature? Through that lens of spirit and spirituality and spring, through that lens of new life, we could just reimagine for a moment together what it might be like. In the conscious presence of divine life, things fall away that are in our way. Things like physical and mental ailments fall away in the presence of that light. Our minds and our hearts refuse to play host anymore to things like loneliness and worry and heavy concerns, this idea of problems. Instead, we look through into the light to solutions. A place of loneliness and confusion and struggle, it just seems to open up and ease somehow when we begin to see ourselves in this true mirror of who we are. And as I speak about nature, of course, there are sounds of animals present. Our worldly ways, our old world ways, the words and actions, they fall away. The old ways that attempted to dominate us, to oppress us, to pit us against one another, they disappear. There is no place for racism or sexism or saneism or ableism or ageism or all the isms, because they have become is-nots. And phobias, homophobia, transphobia, Islamophobia, you name the phobia, there's no place for it anymore. They scatter in the presence of divine light, in this kind of true, natural mirroring of the rhythm and the truth of who we are. So ultimately, we are liberated then from that false and damaging idea, that idea at the base and the root of humanity, this false idea that we are separate. And instead, we move to a kind of vision that we offer through our own community, the unity of Walnut Creek, vision for the world. That we are a spiritually awakened world where all life thrives in conscious oneness. Over the past 5 weeks during the season for nonviolence, the See No Stranger series, we've touched that truth of oneness time and time again. Oneness is our spiritual home base, essentially. It's when we're eradicating and healing humanity's ailments, that's where we can reach for. We can go back to that foundation of oneness. It's the missing piece when we're in the midst of harmful behaviors or we're acting out against one another. It's the touchstone that helps us redirect ourselves and our society to get back on course. When we've forgotten who we are, love is what guides us back on this path of oneness. Valerie Carr brings the actions and practices of revolutionary love to light for us through her book, See No Stranger, and specifically through a lot of the stories she tells. This story that I want to bring forth today occurred and has a powerful aftermath that you'll see, so stick with me. And this story occurred on August 5th, 2012, in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, a suburb just outside of Milwaukee. Like any other Sunday, a day of worship, at the Gurdwara, which is the place of Sikh worship, the people had already gathered. The aunties were in the kitchen preparing the langar, the big meal that would be shared later in the day. The children were running around playing. The men were in their own rooms setting up their turbans, tying them together. There were teachers, a couple of them out front having a chat. And in that process, that is a typical process of a Sunday morning, a man pulled up in a red truck and he stormed that Gurdwara and he shot and killed 7 people and wounded many more. An officer showed up within about a half an hour of his arrival. He was Lieutenant Brian Murphy. And he took 12 bullets from that shooter before the shooter killed himself. Remarkably, Lieutenant Murphy survived. In the aftermath of this tragedy, the community pulled together in amazing ways that provide an example for all of us of how we can overcome unfathomable tragedies and bond together and support each other and do all the things we've been talking about over these last 5 weeks of this series. They came together and grieved with one another. They listened to each other. They healed their hearts together. They restored their community. Normally, the FBI goes in and cleans up the place. They refused that. They went in themselves. They wanted to tear up those carpets themselves and cover those bullet holes themselves and repaint the place with their own hands and their own hearts and their own love and their own service. And so it was through that they did. And then, not only all that, but they forgave Wade Michael Page, the shooter. Amazing things happened. 2 boys, Kamal and Harpreet, they had lost their mother in that tragedy. And at first they wanted to find the white power group who had radicalized Wade so that they could exact revenge. But just in a short period of time, they realized that that's not who they were, and they were supported by their community to remember who they were. And in that remembering, Kamal said, I don't think about that gunman anymore at all. He said, our community is not about retaliation, just love. Pardeep lost his father. He was searching for answers for how in the world did this hate come? What fuels this kind of hate? The kind of question that many of us are asking now, a question we need to be asking now in order to heal what ails us collectively, because remember, we are one. So Pardeep was looking, and he found somebody, Arno Michaelis. He was on TV, and he was speaking about his process of life after hate. He actually happened to be the man who founded the group who did radicalize Wade. And he had since renounced his allegiance, and he was speaking out about why they do what they do and how he moved the process to grasp life instead. He talked about how he couldn't see past the kindness anymore. He tried to hate his gay teacher. He tried to hate the Jewish person that he met. He tried to hate the Muslim. He tried to hate, and every time he was met with kindness, and he just couldn't do it anymore. And so it was through his own transformation that he became a voice for that, and a voice that Pardeep needed to hear. And those 2 young men got together and began to talk and to listen and to heal and to grow, and they actually became friends. Together, the 2 of them, along with some other young men, created Serve to Unite, which serves Milwaukee schools. And in the Milwaukee schools, they go in to talk about the process of life over hate and the choices that get made through that process, and the love and the action that we can all take to eradicate it. The police chief in the town, John Edwards, said this, meeting this group, and by that he means this group, this Sikh group from this community, that it had completely changed him. He talked about all the things he had seen before and all the different scenarios that he had faced and showed up. And he said, all I have seen here is love and compassion and support for the police force, for the city, and even for the shooter. He said, it's changed so many people. And he said, my officers now spend a lot of time at the Gurdwara. They come to service. They come for meals. They come to stop in and to say hello. He said, that is really unusual. Lieutenant Murphy, who miraculously survived those 12 bullets, his voice box is permanently damaged. He can speak in a whisper, but he continues to do the good work. And he was able to speak to this sick community, and he said, my voice has been replaced by yours, Chardi Kala, which means ever-rising spirits. He now trains police officers in crisis response, and he tells them to treat everyone, whether they're pulling them over for a routine stop or there's a big crisis going on, treat them like they're a member of your own family. Imagine if everywhere across the United States and the world that police were trained in that way. They could still do their jobs. They could still be a protective force. They could still use the tools that they need to use to feel safe and to do their jobs well. But instead, they could come from a place that says, treat everyone who you meet as if they are a member of your own family. How things could shift. James Sentell is Wisconsin's U.S. attorney. He's become fluent in Sikh concepts and history, and he even speaks a little Punjabi now. Valerie's own organization, Groundswell, delivered to this community a bound book of 4,000 prayers and letters of people from all across the United States so that they could know when things got tough, when they moved back into the rawness of their grief or the feelings of their grief as time passed, that they could open up this book and remember that they are supported as Sikh Americans. And they've repeated Groundswell, this organization, repeated that process of gathering up all these prayers and letters and sending these bound books to the church in Charlottesville, to the synagogue in Pittsburgh, to the mosques in New Zealand, and anywhere, any worship house where a mass shooting has occurred. At the doorway to the Dewan Hall in the Gurdwara in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, a single bullet hole remains right over that doorway. And below it is inscribed these words, "We are one." When we hear stories like this, and we can feel both inspired and brokenhearted at the same time, we see that there can be a way through even when tragedy, unspeakable tragedies occur. And certainly when that is the case, then in everyday life, when we're met with our challenges and our biases and our uncertainties and our struggles and our fears and anxiety, we can know that there is always a way through. We've literally been given a compass to help us get through. Valerie Carr created the revolutionary love compass that we've been using for these last 5 weeks. And take a look at it again here. And over these weeks, you can see there's 3 basic directions. You can point your compass in the direction of loving others, in the direction of loving ourselves, or in the direction of loving our opponents. And you defined your opponent however it is that you define them. Somebody who has hurt you, somebody who has opposing views, who you're having a hard time navigating, whatever that may be at any given moment. And then we look to the rings that give us ways to act, ways to be love in action. And over these last few weeks, we've wondered, we've grieved, we've listened, we've stood up. Today we're reimagining. Wonder is a practice of seeing no stranger. We can move about the world when we wonder and silently say to ourselves as we meet people, especially when our biases arise, there goes my sister, my brother, my uncle, my aunt, my grandparent, my child. We can say to ourselves, you are a part of me, or to them silently, you are a part of me that I have not yet met. And be curious then. Valerie says that the day I stop wondering about my husband, so we can take this practice home too, the day I stop wondering about my husband is the day that my marriage begins to die just a little. But when, she said, I nurture my curiosity, I feel our relationship revive and flourish. So we can do it at home and everywhere we go, to wonder, to be curious. So we wonder and we grieve. We grieve together. That's a big part of it. Witnessing each other's grief, witnessing each other's pain, creating a space for that, to recognize and honor what has happened. It's easy for us, especially in our New Thought teachings, to misinterpret and spiritually bypass grief. But grief is such an important part of the process. And if we try to leap over it, it isn't effective. There's that wound that's still there, that hasn't been given any honor, any attention, any recognition, any space. And so we give that to each other. One of the things that Valerie suggested to us, you might remember from the week we talked about grieving, is when she spoke about go to public vigils. You don't have to know the people that the vigils are there to represent. You come there to know them. You come there to bear witness. You come there to, as an act of revolutionary love, to grieve with them. And guess what? We've got an opportunity to do exactly that tonight. Tonight in Walnut Creek at Civic Park from 5 to 5:30, there's a vigil. It's for solidarity with Asian Americans. Joanne Finn is one of our members, and she has an Asian American daughter. So she invites you to come personally, to meet her at the corner of Civic and Broadway at 4:45, and to stay for a half-hour vigil, to be in solidarity with Asian Americans who have been targets of violence throughout this pandemic year. We grieve together, we wonder about others and ourselves, and we listen, especially to our opponents. And if we are to be really successful in our listening, we'll veer away from the ideology and the policy and we'll head right for the story. Because it's in the stories of our lives and the listening to the stories of others that we listen from the heart. There's nothing to prepare in response when we're listening to a story. And so we invoke stories of the folks we are listening to by asking, who are you? When did you, first arrive at this idea? What has your journey been like? Tell me more. Tell me more. It's always an invitation for heart listening. And for the sense of, and by success I mean understanding, connection, possibility. Maybe even future collaboration, like the two young men I just spoke of. We listen and we stand up, finally. And not necessarily in any of this is in a linear order, of course. When we stand up on behalf of others and we stand up on behalf of ourselves, we uphold rights and dignity. When we do that, especially when our leaders and our neighbors, our institutions do not, we can be the ones who stand up, who have the courage to stand with one another. And we know that the most powerful way to stand is to remembering that we are not only an ally, but that our liberation is bound up together. That we don't come just as a helper to another, but that we walk beside each other because remember, we are one. And our souls all long to be free. Joe Ma is an Oakland resident. When a lot of this violence was happening, which is continuing unfortunately and has been happening in the Bay Area quite a bit, when it was happening in Oakland, he needed to do something. He wanted to stand up for his fellow Asian Americans, and so he donned an orange vest and he got a bunch of other folks to join him, and they patrol the streets in Oakland, in the Asian neighborhoods, in front of the storefronts. They are a presence of protection, and I would say a presence of divine protection. It doesn't take a lot for us to take action. Simple ideas like these have profound effects for a sense of solidarity, of I'm standing with you, I see you as another human being worthy of the same life that I have, the same rights that I have, the same privileges I enjoy. If standing up for full groups of oppressed people feels overwhelming to you, look to the words of Mother Teresa, who said, and Mother Teresa, if you think about it, who served the masses of the poor in Calcutta, India for her whole lifetime, gives us this advice. If I look to the masses, she says, I will never act. But if I look to the one, I will. So is there one person? Is there one person you can think of right now who might be feeling fearful, that you could reach out to and offer some comfort, some prayer? Is there one person that you could listen to? One person you could wonder about? Somebody you could grieve with or stand up on their behalf? Just one. That's all it takes. And it begins to get us in the rhythm of the other half of our spirituality, which is love in action. So the way of love and the way of peace, it's not complicated. Only our minds make it complicated. I can't do, or I haven't done, or I don't know how. There's plenty of resources out there. There's plenty of training. There's plenty of help. But that's beside the point, really, because we know and hear the truth. And we let that truth of our own hearts guide us in our actions. It is the better way, peace and love, this pathway that we have all chosen, this foundation of oneness. And we can reimagine and live into that imagined, visioned, brighter day. Carrie Hillary sings about exactly that. Let's take a moment to listen to what she has to share with us.
If I stand for anything, I will stand for peace, freedom for all people, love within our reach. 'Cause I believe in liberty and brotherhood of man. When lies are passed as honesty, that's when I'll take a stand. And I will take a stand. 'Cause I know there's a better way. And I can see a brighter day ahead. Embracing peace instead. I won't kill my neighbor in the name of anything. I'll be an example of what peace on earth can mean. 'Cause ignorance or innocence can't be an excuse. Be the darkness or the difference, it's time for us to choose. We have too much to lose. 'Cause I know there's a better way. And I can see a brighter day ahead. Embracing peace instead. Are you searching for answers or hiding from the truth? Are you proud of the legacy we're leaving our youth? Is this the best that we can do? I don't think so. 'Cause nothing's soft with anger, violence or greed. Open minds and tolerance are what our country needs. It's what the whole world needs. 'Cause I
There is indeed a better way, and today we reimagine it. What would it look like for our individual and collective consciousness to be in full bloom? Maybe something like this. Imagine that we as humans, our beautiful diversity was like this field of wildflowers, because it is. All the colors and the shapes, the sizes, the textures, all part of one field. Swaying together maybe in the breeze of life and having that divine light shine upon us. There are two parts to our spiritual work to remake the world. There's the holding of our spiritual vision, and sometimes having an image like that is helpful. Whatever image comes to you that feels like, yeah, I can return to that. I can put that up for myself and return to that and remember again and again. And then there's the holding of the vision, and then there's the actions, right, to make it so. We need both pieces. We walk toward the fruition of our vision by taking the actions that we need to take, including pushing through our comfort zones. And so our individual and collective consciousness then can come into that full, glorious bloom like we just saw. Valerie writes this: "This revolution of love, it's messy. It's complicated and still underway, and often it seems impossible. But isn't that how social change works?" she asks. 1,000 small acts that don't seem to make a difference until a critical mass bursts through into public consciousness. Today, on the second day of spring, we reimagine this new world, this fully flowered consciousness of humanity. And we can see that all of our diverse expressions sort of move in harmony to the winds of life. We can see the beauty in that. It's easy for us to see the beauty in that. So let's outpicture that for humanity. Let's do the spiritual work that is there for us to be able to image in such a way, in such an open way, in such an allowing way. And it's in that field of consciousness that we are fed by love. If you look with your spiritual eye through that field, you can see that there's a pathway through, and that pathway is the pathway to oneness. So we hold the vision and we act. That's all there is to do. Easy peasy, right? We've walked this path of revolutionary love in this season for nonviolence, and this poem is a tribute to our ongoing work together. It's called Homo Sapien, Earth is Quaking. There's a revolution going on. Can you feel it? Rumbling beneath our feet, Earth quakes. In a world of anxiety and terror, compassion and courage, give us air. Depraved thieves attempt to rob lives, but we stand together, arms linked, road blocked. Satyagraha, soul force. With enormous spirit, slight body, Gandhi led the nonviolent march, salt of the earth. You'll find guides like this at every point, masters, saints, gurus, and post to post, angels and elementals cheering us on to love. Love our earthling siblings stricken with spiritual amnesia. Even after horrific acts and gaffes, love them still back to wholeness. And love ourselves, all parts to the whole, the healer and the harmer, the separator and the uniter, the dignifier and the diviner. Love, 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 fierce and messy, tender and kind. Feel the tremor? It's an aftershock. Pandemic that has rocked us to our core. And still shouts just a little more. We are wondering, grieving, listening, standing upright, becoming Homo sapien, wise being, Homo sapien, wise being, awaken. Homo sapien, wise being, awaken. Homo sapien, wise being, awaken to love. Let's affirm our path back to oneness together. Together, I wonder, grieve, listen, stand up, and reimagine. Our consciousness flowers in diverse expressions of oneness, and so it is.